The luxury showroom fell silent the moment the CEO laughed, standing beside a gleaming Porsche that had defeated 3 master mechanics. She pointed toward a grease-stained single dad who had only come to deliver a replacement part. "Fix my Porsche," she joked loudly enough for investors, reporters, and customers to hear, "and I'll marry you." The crowd erupted in laughter. The single dad smiled politely and turned away. Then his young daughter tugged his sleeve and whispered something that made him stop. Without saying a word, he walked toward the Porsche. The CEO folded her arms, amused. Not impressed. Concerned, like he had just discovered something that didn't belong there. Seconds later, he removed a tiny hidden component and asked one question that drained the color from the CEO's face. "How long has this been in your car?" And suddenly, nobody was laughing anymore. The laughter lingered through the showroom long after the CEO's joke landed. Investors smirked. Reporters exchanged amused glances. Customers pulled out their phones, expecting to capture another embarrassing moment for the man in the oil-stained work shirt standing near the entrance. The single dad didn't react. He simply held the small replacement part he had been sent to deliver and looked down at his daughter. She couldn't have been older than 9. Her backpack hung loosely from one shoulder, and she seemed far more interested in the bright red Porsche than in the people laughing around them. "Dad," she whispered, tugging gently on his sleeve. He bent down slightly. "That car sounds sad." A few nearby guests overheard her and chuckled. The single dad smiled. "Cars don't get sad, sweetheart." She pointed toward the Porsche. "That one does." Before he could answer, the CEO folded her arms and looked directly at him. "Well," she asked with a grin, "are you going to save my Porsche or not?" More laughter followed. The single dad remained calm. "I'm just here to deliver a part." "Convenient answer," one investor said. "Probably smarter than touching that car," another added. The CEO shook her head dramatically. The challenge hung in the air. Most people expected him to walk away. Instead, his daughter quietly took his hand. "You always fix things." For a brief moment, he looked at her, then at the Porsche. The confidence in her eyes was impossible to ignore. Slowly, he handed the replacement package to a nearby employee. "Where are your tools?" he asked. The room instantly became silent. The CEO raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "Just curious." A toolbox was brought over. Several reporters moved closer. Phones rose into the air. The single dad approached the Porsche without any sign of nervousness. Unlike everyone else, he didn't start the engine. He didn't ask for diagnostic reports. He didn't even sit in the driver's seat. Instead, he slowly walked around the vehicle. Once, twice, studying every angle. The CEO's amused expression began to fade. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. The single dad finally stopped near the front of the car. Then he opened the hood. The crowd leaned forward. For several seconds, nothing happened. His eyes moved carefully across the engine compartment. Every wire, every connector, every component. His face remained completely unreadable. Then something changed. A small crease appeared on his forehead. Not confusion, recognition. His daughter noticed immediately. "Dad," he didn't answer. Instead, he reached deeper into the engine bay and gently moved aside a protective cover. The movement revealed a tiny metallic piece hidden behind several factory components. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. The crowd certainly didn't. But the single dad stared at it as though he had just found something impossible. The CEO's smile disappeared completely. "What is it?" she asked. Still no answer. He carefully removed the small object and held it in his hand. The room grew quieter than before. The single dad turned the component over, examining it, studying the markings engraved on its surface. Then he looked directly at the CEO. For the first time since entering the showroom, his calm expression carried genuine concern. "How long has this been in your car?" The question hit her like a punch. Color drained from her face. Several investors noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" one of them asked. The CEO didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the object in the single dad's hand. And for the first time that day, she looked afraid. The silence inside the showroom became almost unbearable. Everyone was looking at the CEO. Everyone was waiting for an answer. But instead of speaking, she took a slow step forward, her eyes fixed on the small metallic component resting in the single dad's palm. "Where did you find that?" she asked quietly. The confidence that had filled her voice minutes earlier was gone. The crowd noticed. So did the investors. The single dad glanced back at the open engine bay. It was hidden behind the wiring harness. Someone didn't want it to be seen. A murmur spread through the room. One of the mechanics immediately stepped closer. "That's impossible," he said. "We inspected everything." The single dad shook his head. "You inspected what was visible." The mechanic fell silent. The CEO extended her hand. "Let me see it." He carefully passed the component to her. The moment she turned it over, her expression tightened. There was a small serial number engraved along the edge, a number she clearly recognized. "What does it mean?" an investor asked. She hesitated. "Nothing." The answer came too quickly. Nobody believed it, especially not the single dad. His eyes narrowed slightly as he watched her reaction. If the component meant nothing, why did she suddenly look like she wanted the entire conversation to end? His daughter stepped beside him. "Dad, is the car fixed?" The question broke the tension for a moment. "Not yet," he replied softly. Then his attention returned to the Porsche. Something still didn't make sense. A hidden component alone couldn't cause all these problems. There had to be something else, something connected to it. As the CEO slipped the piece in her pocket, a voice suddenly echoed from the back of the showroom. "Take that car off the floor. Right now." Heads turned instantly. An older man in an expensive suit was striding through the crowd. The CEO's eyes widened. The investors looked confused. But the single dad noticed something everyone else missed. The moment the older man saw the serial number, he looked terrified. And that meant the secret inside the Porsche was far bigger than anyone had imagined. The older man pushed through the crowd with surprising urgency. "Move the car," he repeated. Immediately, the showroom staff exchanged uncertain looks, unsure whether to follow his order or wait for the CEO to respond. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The CEO straightened her posture and forced her expression back under control. "This is a private company matter," she said firmly. The older man stopped a few feet away from the Porsche. "No," he replied. It became much bigger than that the moment he found that component. His eyes shifted toward the single dad, not with anger, with caution, as if he suddenly realized he was dealing with someone more dangerous than he had expected. The crowd sensed the tension growing. Reporters began recording again. Investors moved closer. The single dad remained calm. "Who are you?" he asked. The man hesitated before answering. "I used to work here." "Used to." The wording immediately caught everyone's attention. The CEO folded her arms. "You left 10 years ago." "That's not how I remember it," the man replied. An uncomfortable silence followed. It was obvious there was history between them. History nobody else understood. The single dad looked back at the Porsche. Something about the situation bothered him. The hidden component, the serial number, the fear on both of their faces. None of it matched a simple mechanical problem. Then he noticed something attached to the underside of a panel near the firewall. A small faded sticker, almost impossible to see. Carefully, he leaned closer. The sticker contained a code. Not a factory code. A project code. The moment he read it, his eyes widened slightly. The older man's face turned pale. The CEO looked away. "What does that code mean?" an investor demanded. Neither of them answered. The single dad slowly stood upright. "I've seen this format before," he said. Every eye in the showroom locked onto him. The older man swallowed hard. "That's impossible." "Maybe," the single dad replied. "But this code belongs to a prototype program that was supposed to disappear years ago." But before anyone could get an answer, a security guard rushed into the showroom holding a tablet. His face was filled with alarm. "Ma'am," he said to the CEO, "you need to see this right now." The CEO took the tablet from the security guard and stared at the screen. The color drained from her face once again. For a moment, she looked completely frozen. "What is it?" one of the investors asked. She didn't answer. The older man stepped closer and glanced at the display. His reaction was even worse. He immediately looked toward the Porsche, then toward the single dad. as if a puzzle he had spent years trying to avoid was suddenly coming back to life. The crowd grew restless. Everyone wanted answers. The reporters could barely contain their excitement. "What's on the screen?" he asked. The CEO slowly lowered the tablet. "A file was just accessed," she said. "An archive file. Related to the prototype program?" She nodded. The room erupted into whispers. The prototype program. The mysterious code. The hidden component. The pieces were beginning to connect. "What was the program?" an investor demanded. The CEO hesitated. Then she took a deep breath. 10 years ago, our company developed a revolutionary automotive system. It was years ahead of anything on the market. The crowd listened carefully. It could have changed the entire industry. "Then what happened?" someone asked. The older man answered before she could. "It disappeared." The room fell silent. "Not because it failed," he continued, "because someone made sure it never reached the public." Shock spread through the showroom. The single dad looked back at the Porsche. Now the strange modifications made more sense. This wasn't just a luxury sports car. It was carrying something far more valuable. Something hidden. Something protected. His eyes moved across the engine bay again. Then he noticed another unusual detail tucked beneath a panel. Carefully, he removed it. A sealed metal case. Small. Dust-covered. Deliberately concealed. The crowd watched in stunned silence. "What is that?" the CEO whispered. The single dad examined the case. There was a company logo on one side, and beneath it, a handwritten signature. The older man's knees nearly gave out when he saw it, because the signature belonged to the lead inventor of the lost billion-dollar project, a man who had supposedly destroyed all his work before vanishing without a trace. A wave of disbelief swept through the showroom. The sealed metal case seemed to weigh far more than its size suggested. Every person in the room understood that they were no longer looking at a broken Porsche. They were looking at a piece of company history, possibly worth billions. The CEO carefully reached toward the case, but before her fingers touched it, one of the investors stepped forward. "Don't open it." His sharp tone immediately drew attention. Several heads turned. The single dad noticed something strange. The investor looked nervous. Far more nervous than someone concerned about company property should be. "Why not?" the CEO asked. "Because we don't know what's inside." "That sounds like exactly why we should open it," she replied. The investor forced a smile. "Or it could create legal problems." The older man laughed bitterly. "Legal problems?" His eyes narrowed. For 10 years, nobody cared about legal problems when this project vanished. The tension escalated instantly. The investors began exchanging uneasy glances among themselves. The single dad quietly observed everything. People often revealed the truth when they felt pressure. And right now, several people looked uncomfortable. Too uncomfortable. His daughter gently squeezed his hand. "Dad, yeah. Why are they scared?" The innocent question hung in the air. Nobody answered, because everyone was wondering the same thing. The CEO finally took the metal case and examined its surface. Along the edge was a locking mechanism requiring a code. Not a key, not a fingerprint, a code. Then she noticed something engraved beneath the inventor's signature. A date. The exact date the project had officially been shut down. Her eyes widened. The single dad noticed. "What is it?" Before she could respond, the nervous investor suddenly stepped forward. "Give me the case." The demand shocked everyone. The showroom fell silent. "Excuse me," the CEO said. "That case belongs to the company." "No," the investor replied quickly. "It's evidence." His answer only made him sound more suspicious. The older man's expression darkened. Then he pointed directly at the investor. "You're afraid that case contains records, aren't you?" The investor's face tightened. And for the first time, nobody in the room doubted that he knew far more about the missing prototype than he was admitting. The accusation hit the showroom like a shockwave. Every camera turned toward the investor. Every eye followed him. For a brief second, he looked trapped. Then he recovered. "You're making assumptions," he said coldly. "A lockbox doesn't prove anything." The older man took a step forward. "No, but your reaction does. The investor's jaw tightened. The CEO looked between them, realizing that the story she had been told for years might not be true. The single dad remained near the Porsche, quietly thinking. Something still didn't add up. If the investor was involved, why would evidence remain hidden inside a car for an entire decade? People who cover their tracks usually don't leave behind proof, unless they never knew the proof existed. Open the case, one reporter shouted. Soon others joined in. Open it. Let's see what's inside. The pressure grew by the second. The CEO looked down at the engraved date again. Then she entered the numbers into the lock. The showroom became completely silent. One beep, then another, a third. Everyone held their breath. Click. The lock released. A collective gasp filled the room. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside were several documents, a flash drive, and a folded envelope marked with one handwritten instruction. For the person who finally finds the truth. The single dad felt a chill run through him. The older man's hands began to shake. The investor looked like he wanted to leave. The CEO carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. The signature at the bottom belonged to the missing inventor. She began reading silently. At first, her expression showed confusion, then surprise, then disbelief. Finally, she looked up, directly at the single dad. The entire room noticed. What does it say? Someone asked. The CEO swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. The inventor wrote that if this case was ever found. She paused. The crowd leaned forward. The first person who understood what was hidden inside the Porsche should be trusted above everyone else. Silence. Then she finished the sentence. And he wrote that person's name. The single dad stared at her. The CEO stared back, because the name written in the letter was his. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The words seemed impossible. The single dad stood motionless beside the Porsche, staring at the CEO as if he had misheard her. The crowd reacted first. A wave of whispers spread through the showroom. How could the inventor know him? That makes no sense. Who is this guy? The reporters immediately began firing questions, but the CEO ignored them. Her eyes remained fixed on a name at the bottom of the letter. Then she looked at the single dad again. You knew him? The single dad slowly shook his head. Not personally. The older man frowned. Then why would he write your name? I don't know. It was the truth. At least, the part of the truth he understood. The CEO unfolded another page hidden inside the envelope. This one contained several handwritten notes, schematics, technical observations, and a short paragraph. As she read it, her expression changed once again. The room waited. Finally, she looked up. The inventor wrote that years ago he met a young engineer who solved a design problem in less than 20 minutes. The single dad's eyes widened. A memory surfaced. A small workshop. A crowded engineering conference. A conversation that had lasted less than half an hour. He hadn't thought about it in years. He remembered me, the single dad whispered. The older man stared. You were an engineer? The crowd fell silent. Nobody had expected that. The man they had mocked as a delivery worker and mechanic suddenly seemed very different. The single dad took a slow breath. Before my wife passed away, I worked in automotive design. His daughter looked up at him. She had heard pieces of the story before, but never the whole thing. After she died, I left everything behind, he continued quietly. My daughter needed me more than my career did. The showroom grew still. For the first time all day, nobody was laughing. The CEO looked at him differently now. Not with amusement, not with pity, with respect. The older man picked up one of the documents from a case. As he scanned the pages, his face darkened. Unbelievable. What? The CEO asked. He handed her the document. These records identify who sabotaged the prototype program. A collective gasp spread through the crowd. The nervous investor immediately took a step backward. The movement didn't go unnoticed. The single dad saw it. So did the CEO. The older man slowly turned toward the investor. There it is, he said. 10 years of lies. The investor's confidence finally cracked. Sweat appeared on his forehead. His hands trembled. And as security guards quietly moved toward him, everyone realized the truth was about to come out. But the biggest surprise wasn't the evidence. It was what the final document revealed. Because the missing inventor hadn't just predicted who would uncover the secret. He had left behind instructions naming who should lead the project when it returned. And once again, that name belonged to the single dad. The showroom exploded with questions. Reporters pushed forward. Investors began arguing among themselves. Employees who had spent years hearing rumors about the lost prototype suddenly found themselves standing in the middle of the truth. Yet through all the noise, the single dad remained silent. He wasn't focused on the attention. He was focused on the document. The CEO carefully handed it to him. His hands moved slowly as he read the final pages. The missing inventor's handwriting filled every line. There were technical notes, future plans, and one final message. A message written years ago for a day that nobody believed would ever come. The single dad read it twice. Then a third time. His daughter tugged gently on his arm. What does it say? He looked down and smiled softly. It says some people build things because they want money. She nodded. And some people build things because they want to make life better for others. The CEO watched quietly. For the first time, she understood why the inventor had trusted him. Not because of his engineering skills alone, but because of who he was. Meanwhile, security guards had surrounded the investor. The documents from the case revealed a trail of secret transactions, hidden agreements, and decisions that had buried the prototype before it could reach the market. Years of deception were finally unraveling. The investor lowered his head. He knew there was nowhere left to hide. The older man let out a long breath. For 10 years, he said, people thought the project failed. The CEO nodded. And all this time, it was stolen from us. The crowd fell silent again. Then the CEO stepped onto a small presentation platform near the center of the showroom. Every camera immediately turned toward her. She looked at the employees, the investors, the reporters, and finally the single dad standing beside his daughter. I owe someone an apology. The room became completely still. When he walked into the showroom today, I judged him before I knew anything about him. The single dad lowered his eyes slightly. I laughed at him. Her voice carried across the room. And I was wrong. The crowd listened carefully. Then she took a deep breath. The inventor trusted him. She paused. The evidence trusts him. Another pause. And after everything I've seen today, a small smile appeared on her face. So do I. The room erupted into applause. Employees stood first, then customers, then even some of the investors. The single dad looked down at his daughter. Tears of pride filled her eyes. And in that moment, he realized something he hadn't felt in years. Not recognition, not success, belonging. But as the applause continued, the CEO picked up a microphone and prepared to make one final announcement that would change both of their futures forever. The applause slowly faded, but the energy inside the showroom remained electric. Everyone was waiting. The CEO stood at the center of the platform, microphone in hand, while cameras from every major business outlet pointed directly at her. The single dad shifted uncomfortably. He had never enjoyed being the center of attention. His daughter, however, looked fascinated by everything happening around them. The CEO smiled before speaking. 10 years ago, this company lost something extraordinary. She glanced toward the Porsche, a project that could have changed the future of automotive technology. The audience listened closely. We also lost something else. She paused. People. Several employees exchanged confused looks. The CEO continued. We lost innovators, dreamers, and talented individuals because the wrong voices were allowed to make decisions. Her gaze settled on the single dad. And today, one of those people came back through our doors. The crowd erupted into applause again. The single dad looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. The CEO smiled. I know you didn't come here looking for recognition. No, he replied honestly. I came to deliver a part. Laughter spread through the room. For the first time that day, it was warm laughter. Respectful laughter. The CEO nodded. And somehow you ended up uncovering the biggest secret in our company's history. More applause followed. Then her expression grew serious. The inventor left clear instructions. She lifted the final document. He believed this project should only continue under the leadership of someone who understood both the technology and the responsibility that comes with it. The crowd already knew where this was going. The CEO turned toward the single dad. On behalf of this company, I would like to offer you the position of Director of Advanced Innovation and Restoration of the Prototype Program. The showroom erupted. Employees cheered. Reporters rushed to capture every second. The older man smiled for the first time all day. The single dad stood frozen. His daughter looked up at him with excitement. "Dad," he laughed softly. "I heard." The CEO stepped off the platform and walked toward him. "This isn't charity," she said. "You earned it." The sincerity in her voice was impossible to miss. For a moment, the single dad looked at the Porsche, then at the documents, then at his daughter. Everything he had sacrificed, everything he had left behind, everything he thought was gone forever. It was suddenly standing in front of him again. The crowd waited for his answer. The CEO waited too. Then the single dad smiled. "I'll accept." The room exploded with celebration. But before the excitement could settle, the CEO leaned closer and said something only he could hear. A sentence that immediately made him stare at her in surprise. The celebration continued around them, but for a moment, the noise seemed to disappear. The single dad looked at the CEO, surprised by what she had just said. She smiled slightly. "You still haven't answered my joke from earlier." He blinked. Then he laughed. For the first time all day, it was a genuine, relaxed laugh. His daughter looked between them. "What joke?" The CEO shook her head. "Nothing important." The crowd nearby had already started whispering after noticing their expressions. The single dad smiled and looked down at his daughter. "Trust me, sweetheart. The important part today isn't the joke." "Then what is it?" He knelt beside her. "The important part is that people should never decide what someone is worth just by looking at them." She thought about that carefully. Then she nodded. The CEO watched the exchange with admiration. It was easy to understand now why the inventor had trusted this man. Not because he was brilliant, not because he could solve impossible engineering problems, but because success had never changed what mattered most to him. Family, integrity, responsibility. The older man approached, holding the final documents. "I think he'd be proud," he said quietly. The single dad knew exactly who he meant. The missing inventor, a man he had only met briefly years ago. Yet somehow, that short encounter had left enough of an impression to be remembered a decade later. "Maybe," he replied. The older man smiled. "No, definitely." Across the showroom, employees were already discussing plans for the revival of the prototype program. For the first time in years, excitement had replaced uncertainty. The future looked possible again. The CEO stepped beside the Porsche and held out a key. "There's one more thing." The single dad raised an eyebrow. "What now?" She smiled. "This car finally belongs to someone who understands it." The crowd laughed and applauded. He looked at the key, then at the Porsche. The same car that had started the entire chain of events. The same car that had revealed hidden secrets, exposed corruption, and reopened a chapter of his life he thought had ended forever. His daughter grinned. "Can we keep it?" The showroom erupted with laughter. The CEO laughed too. "We'll discuss that." The single dad shook his head, smiling. As cameras flashed around them, he opened a driver's door and helped his daughter into the passenger seat. Then he sat behind the wheel. The engine started instantly. Smooth, powerful, perfect. The entire showroom applauded as the sound echoed through the building. And as he drove slowly toward the exit with his daughter beside him, he realized something remarkable. He had walked into the showroom as a man everyone underestimated. He was leaving as the person who had restored a forgotten dream, uncovered the truth, and found a future he never expected to have again. And this time, he wasn't driving away from his past. He was driving towards something even better,